I was trapped after a car crash. A cold mafia boss rescued a single mom and refused to let go. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. Emily Walker's heart raced as she sat frozen behind the wheel of her car, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The world outside was a blur of rain and headlights, the sound of her car's engine barely audible over the heavy downpour. She had always been cautious, always in control, but tonight had been different. The storm had come out of nowhere, and despite her best efforts, she had lost control of the vehicle. The crash had been loud and unforgiving. Emily's hands were still gripping the steering wheel, her knuckles white from the force, her body trembling from the shock. The car was wedged between two trees, the front end crumpled, the airbags deployed, and her seatbelt tight across her chest. She could feel the panic rising in her throat as she tried to free herself from the wreckage. But the door wouldn't budge. Her heart pounded in her chest, her head spinning. Alone, cold, and helpless. Her thoughts raced. What if no one came? What if she didn't make it out? Then, just as her thoughts began to spiral, she heard a sound. Footsteps. Steady, measured, like someone who knew exactly where they were going. The sound of heavy boots sloshing in the rain. Emily's eyes flickered toward the side mirror, and that's when she saw him. A man. Tall, dressed in dark clothes that blended seamlessly with the night. His steps were purposeful, his gaze intense as he moved toward her car. He stopped a few feet away, and in the dim light, she saw his face. Sharp features, eyes like dark storms. There was a coldness about him, an unapproachable air that made her heart beat even faster. He didn't speak at first, just stood there, watching her with an unsettling calm. Then, without warning, he moved to the front of the car and began inspecting the damage, his gaze moving over the crumpled hood, the cracked windshield. The rain soaked his clothes, but he didn't seem to care. He reached for the door handle, his fingers moving with practiced ease, and the door popped open with a soft click. Emily barely had time to react before he was pulling her out of the wreckage, his grip firm, but not rough. He didn't say anything as he helped her to her feet, his eyes scanning her for any signs of injury. The warmth of his hand against her arm was a strange contrast to the chill of the rain. "Are you all right?" he finally asked, his voice low, gravelly, like it had been honed over years of silence. Emily nodded, too stunned to speak, her body still shaking with the aftershocks of the crash. "You're lucky," he said, his gaze sweeping over her once more, taking in her disheveled appearance, the way her clothes clung to her damp skin. "I'm not." Emily's words were barely a whisper, her throat tight with emotion. She had always prided herself on being strong, independent, but tonight had broken her. He didn't offer any words of comfort, but his presence was overwhelming. There was something about him, something dangerous and magnetic, like he was both an enigma and an anchor, and she felt herself being drawn to him despite her fear. "Come with me," he said, his voice softer now, though there was still a command in it. "You don't have to be alone." Before she could protest, he had already turned, his footsteps echoing in the rain-soaked night, his hand still firmly on her arm, guiding her along. Emily didn't know why, but she didn't resist. She was so far out of her element, but somehow, in that moment, she didn't want to be anywhere else. There was something undeniably compelling about him, and as they walked toward the waiting car, Emily couldn't help but feel that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't yet understand. Whatever the future held, she knew one thing for sure. This man, this cold, enigmatic stranger, was not someone she could simply walk away from. Not anymore. The car was sleek and black, its engine purring as they drove away from the wrecked scene. Emily sat quietly in the passenger seat, still processing everything that had happened. The rain had stopped, but the air was thick with tension. The man beside her, the one who had saved her life, was as silent as the night. His dark eyes occasionally flicked to her, assessing her every movement, yet never speaking a word. She had no idea who he was or why he was helping her, but something in the way he held himself made her reluctant to question him. His presence was commanding, yet not oppressive. It felt almost protective, as if she was meant to be in this car with him. "What's your name?" she finally asked, her voice breaking the silence. The question hung in the air for a moment. Before he answered, his tone measured and cold, yet there was a hint of something else beneath it. "Alexander Romano." She swallowed, feeling a wave of unease. She had heard of the Romanos. Who hadn't? They were known for their wealth and influence, their names synonymous with power. She had always thought of them as untouchable, like distant figures in a story she could never be a part of. But here she was, in a car with one of them, after a car crash that had turned her world upside down. "You don't have to say anything," Alexander said, his gaze turning briefly toward her. "Just get some rest. You're safe." Emily nodded, too exhausted to argue, but her mind was racing. Who was he really? What did he want from her? And why had he gone to such lengths to help a stranger like her? She had a million questions, but she didn't know where to start. The world outside seemed so far away, the city lights flickering past like a dream. She tried to close her eyes, but sleep didn't come. Instead, the memory of the crash, of being trapped in the wreckage, kept replaying in her mind. She could still hear the screech of tires, feel the impact of the crash, and then nothing. But then, he had appeared. Like a shadow, he had pulled her from the wreckage, his hands strong and sure, lifting her as though she weighed nothing. He had not hesitated, not for a moment. And now, here they were, driving through the night. The car slowed, pulling into a private driveway that seemed to stretch on forever. The lights from the security cameras above illuminated the entrance to a mansion that looked like something out of a movie. Emily's breath caught in her throat. "Where are we?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "My home," Alexander replied simply. The car stopped, and without another word, he got out and walked around to open her door. She hesitated for a moment, still trying to process everything, but the cold night air and the strange warmth of his presence compelled her to follow. As she stepped out of the car, she felt the weight of the situation settling in. She wasn't sure if she should be afraid or if she could trust him. All she knew was that, for reasons she couldn't explain, she didn't feel entirely safe, but she didn't feel entirely afraid either. Alexander's eyes met hers as they walked toward the mansion. There was something about the way he looked at her, a quiet intensity, like he was studying her, understanding her in ways no one else ever had. She couldn't help but wonder what this man saw in her. They reached the front door, and it opened almost immediately. A tall, broad-shouldered man in a dark suit stood inside, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Romano," he said with a nod, his voice deep and respectful. "Everything is ready." "Good," Alexander replied, his voice firm and authoritative. Emily glanced at him, wondering what he meant by everything. What had he planned for her? But she couldn't ask, at least not yet. Her mind was still in a whirlwind, trying to catch up with the events of the evening. Alexander guided her inside, the door closing softly behind them. She could feel the weight of his gaze on her once more, and despite the luxury of the mansion, the overwhelming sense of unfamiliarity made her feel small and uncertain. "You'll be safe here," he said, his voice like velvet, yet there was an edge to it, an unspoken command that made her believe him. For the first time that night, Emily felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. She was in a house that felt like a fortress, with walls too high to climb and doors that locked her in. But somehow, she didn't feel trapped. Not yet. As Alexander led her further into the house, she could hear the faint sound of footsteps behind them. The mansion was silent except for the occasional hum of the lights, the faint echo of their steps on the marble floors. Emily didn't know where she was being taken, but in that moment, she knew she had no choice but to follow. Something about this man, this cold Mafia boss, made her feel like she was meant to be here, whether she liked it or not. The mansion was far more imposing up close, its towering walls and grand windows reflecting the moonlight, casting long shadows on the perfectly manicured lawn. Emily walked through the marble hallway, feeling the cool touch of the walls beneath her fingertips as she followed Alexander. She could feel the weight of his presence beside her, every step he took purposeful and commanding, while she, still in shock, moved almost instinctively, unsure of her next move. They stopped in front of a large door, dark wood with intricate carvings, the handle polished to perfection. Alexander reached for it, his fingers brushing lightly against the cool surface before he opened the door with a quiet creak. The room beyond was dimly lit, with tall bookshelves lining the walls and large, comfortable chairs that seemed inviting, yet somehow distant. The air was thick with the scent of aged wood and leather. "Sit," Alexander commanded, his voice soft but firm. Emily hesitated for a moment, unsure if she should protest or comply. But her body, worn from the crash, betrayed her, and she found herself lowering herself into one of the chairs. The room was far more intimate than the grand foyer, and as she sat, the enormity of the situation began to hit her. She was alone, in a mansion, with a man she barely knew, a man who had rescued her from certain danger but who also felt like a stranger. Alexander walked to a nearby desk, his back to her, his hands moving over a few papers. "You've had quite the night," he said, his tone a little softer, but still carrying that undeniable authority. Emily didn't respond, unsure of what to say. "I want to make sure you're comfortable here," he continued, his voice calm. But there was an edge to it that made her feel uneasy. "You'll be safe, as long as you stay in line." He turned to face her then, his gaze intense, as if he was trying to gauge her reaction. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. There was something about him that made her nervous, yet part of her couldn't deny the pull, the strange comfort that came with being in his presence. She wanted to ask so many questions, to demand answers about why he was helping her, but something told her to wait. She couldn't explain it, but she felt like this man, this cold, commanding figure, was not someone who would tolerate being questioned. "I know this is a lot to take in," he said, taking a step closer to her. "But I'm offering you something more than safety. I'm offering you a chance." His words hung in the air between them, and Emily's heart raced in her chest. A chance for what? She was about to ask when he interrupted her thoughts. "A chance to get away from the chaos of your life," he said, his eyes never leaving hers. "To build something new." His words were like a whisper in the dark, stirring something deep inside her that she couldn't quite name. Emily looked away, trying to compose herself. She wasn't sure what he was offering, but she knew one thing. Nothing came without a price, especially not from someone like him. Alexander stepped back, his posture shifting slightly, but still exuding the same quiet authority. "Think about it," he said simply, before turning toward the door. "Tomorrow, we'll talk more." Emily sat there for a long moment after he left, the weight of his words pressing down on her. What was she supposed to think? A part of her wanted to reject everything he had said, to walk out and leave this life behind. But another part of her, one that she couldn't ignore, was drawn to him, to the promise of something different. Whatever it was too late to turn back now. She had no choice but to wait and see where this path would lead. The sound of the door clicking shut echoed in the room, and for a moment, Emily was left alone with her thoughts. She wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt like she had a chance at something more. Whether that was a gift or a curse, she couldn't say just yet. But she was about to find out. The following morning, Emily awoke in a bed that was softer than anything she had ever known. The sheets were silk, the comforter thick and warm, but none of it felt familiar. She shifted under the blankets, the events of last night swirling in her mind. The crash, Alexander, the mansion. She had barely slept, but now that the daylight filtered through the heavy curtains, she realized the weight of it all. She was trapped in a world she didn't understand, surrounded by luxury, yet feeling more uncertain than ever. The door to the room opened quietly, and a tall woman in a crisp, black uniform entered. Emily sat up, startled. The woman was carrying a tray with breakfast, and her expression was calm, professional, as if she had done this 1,000 times. "Mr. Romano requested that you have something to eat before your meeting," she said, her voice smooth and respectful. Emily didn't say anything at first. She didn't know what to make of Alexander's request. A meeting? What did he want from her? She wasn't sure, but she wasn't going to find out by hiding in this room. She had to face whatever came next. "Thank you," she said quietly, unsure of what else to say. The woman placed the tray on the nightstand, then turned to leave, pausing only to offer a brief nod. "If you need anything, just let us know." Emily watched her leave, the door clicking softly behind her. She looked at the breakfast, a simple spread of eggs, toast, and fresh fruit, and realized how hungry she actually was. The past few days had been a blur, and the exhaustion from the crash and the strange events that followed had taken its toll. She ate quickly, her mind racing with thoughts of the night before. Why had Alexander saved her? Why had he brought her here, to his home? What did he expect from her? She finished her breakfast and stood up, pulling the curtains open slightly. The view from the window was breathtaking. Sprawling gardens that seemed to stretch for miles, and beyond that, a distant view of the city. It was beautiful, but it felt so far removed from her reality. Her life had been simple before all of this. She had a job. She had a daughter. She had a life that was messy but familiar. And now? Now she was here, in this mansion, with a man whose world she didn't understand. She turned away from the window and began to dress, pulling on a simple blouse and jeans. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get her through the day. As she finished getting ready, she heard footsteps outside the door. The door opened, and there stood Alexander, his gaze intense as always, though this time, there was a hint of something softer in his eyes. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice low and commanding. Emily nodded, though she wasn't sure what she was ready for. She followed him out of the room, her heart pounding as they walked down the long hallways of the mansion. She could feel his presence beside her, like a shadow that never left. They entered a large, formal room, where a large wooden table sat in the center, papers neatly arranged. There were 2 chairs on opposite sides, and Alexander gestured for her to sit. Emily did, her stomach tightening. "I wanted to talk," he began, his voice steady, "about what happened last night. And what happens now." Emily swallowed, trying to steady her nerves. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm offering you something," he said, his eyes locking onto hers. A chance to start over, to leave everything behind. Emily's mind whirled. Leave everything behind. She had a life, a daughter. But Alexander was right about one thing. Her life was in chaos. Her job barely paid the bills. Her relationship with her ex was falling apart. And now this strange encounter with a man who had pulled her from the wreckage and brought her into his world. She didn't know what to say, how to respond. She didn't know if she could trust him, but part of her wanted to. "What exactly do you want from me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alexander's expression softened, but there was still an edge to it, a coolness that kept her on edge. "I want nothing from you," he said, "but I know you have potential. I've seen it in you since last night. You're stronger than you think." Emily didn't know how to respond to that. She wasn't strong. She was just trying to survive. But somehow, with him, she felt like there was something more. Something she couldn't yet put her finger on. "Think about it," he said, standing up. "You have the opportunity to change your life. All I'm asking is that you consider it." He turned and walked toward the door, then paused. "I'll give you time to think. Take all the time you need. But don't take too long." And with that, he left, leaving Emily alone in the room, her heart racing, her mind swirling with thoughts of what this all meant. Would she take the chance he was offering? Would she stay or leave? She didn't know yet, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she had a choice. And that was more than she had ever had before. The next few days blurred together in a haze of uncertainty. Emily spent her time wandering the grand halls of the mansion, getting used to the silence that surrounded her. The staff was polite but distant, never offering more than what was required. Alexander was always somewhere in the background, a constant presence that she couldn't ignore. She had tried to stay busy, trying to process everything that had happened, but it felt like the walls were closing in on her. There was no escaping this new life she had been thrust into. Her thoughts constantly returned to the decision she had to make. Should she stay or leave? Should she accept the opportunity Alexander had offered her, or go back to her old life? But what was left of that life? Her job barely covered her bills. Her relationship with her ex was falling apart, and now she was stuck in a mansion, surrounded by luxury, but feeling more lost than ever. One evening, Alexander invited her to dinner. He had been unusually quiet lately, his presence more distant, and she couldn't help but wonder if he was growing tired of her. As she walked into the dining room, she was struck by the sheer elegance of the place. The table was set for 2, and the candles flickered softly in the dim light. Alexander was already sitting, his eyes watching her as she entered. "Please sit," he said, his voice smooth and inviting. Emily hesitated but took the seat across from him. The meal was simple yet exquisite, and for the first time since she had arrived, she found herself enjoying the company. They talked about everything and nothing, the conversation flowing easily between them, yet there was still an air of tension in the room, an unspoken question hanging in the air. As the meal came to an end, Alexander placed his fork down and leaned back in his chair, his gaze never leaving her. "Have you thought about my offer?" he asked, his voice low but insistent. Emily felt her heart race as she met his eyes. She had thought about little else in the past few days. The opportunity to start over, to leave her old life behind, was tempting, but was it the right decision? Could she really walk away from everything she knew? "I don't know if I can," she said softly, her voice shaky. "I don't know if I can leave my life behind, my daughter." The mention of her daughter made her pause. Emily had always put her first, and now, in this strange new world, she couldn't help but wonder what was best for her. "I'm not asking you to leave everything behind," Alexander said, his tone almost gentle. "I'm offering you a chance to make something of yourself, to have the freedom you deserve." His words lingered in the air, and Emily felt a knot tighten in her chest. She didn't know what to believe anymore. Part of her wanted to run, to leave this world of wealth and power behind, but another part of her couldn't help but be drawn to it. Could she really trust him? Could she trust herself? Alexander's gaze softened for a moment, and Emily saw a flicker of something else in his eyes, something that wasn't so cold, so calculating. "I know it's not easy," he said, his voice quieter now, "but I'm not asking for your trust. I'm asking for a chance to see where this can go." Emily looked at him, the weight of his words pressing down on her. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew one thing. Whatever she decided, it wouldn't be easy. The room was silent for a long moment before Alexander stood up, breaking the tension. "Take your time," he said. "You don't have to decide now." Emily watched him walk toward the door, her mind spinning. She didn't know what she was supposed to do. She didn't know what was right anymore. All she knew was that she was standing on the edge of something, and the choice was hers to make. She could stay, accept his offer, and try to build a new life. Or she could leave, go back to what she knew, and face the unknown. Either way, she was trapped in her own choices, and the future seemed just as uncertain as the present. As the door closed behind him, Emily was left alone with her thoughts once more, the weight of the decision pressing down on her shoulders. Whatever she chose, she knew one thing for certain. There was no going back. The following morning, Emily woke up with a strange sense of clarity. The mansion was quiet, almost unnervingly so. The pale sunlight filtering through the curtains was the only sign that the day had begun. She lay there for a moment, trying to push away the overwhelming sense of confusion that had settled over her since the night before. She had barely slept, her mind constantly racing with thoughts of Alexander, his offer, and the life she had left behind. But as she sat up, the weight of the decision she had to make pressed heavily on her chest. She had never imagined herself in a place like this, surrounded by so much wealth and power. She had never imagined herself as a part of this world, yet here she was. The truth was, she didn't know what she was supposed to do. She didn't know if she could trust Alexander, or if she should even try to build something with him. Her daughter. Emily's thoughts turned to her daughter. She couldn't leave her behind, could she? She had promised herself that she would never let anything separate them. But the pull of Alexander's world was undeniable, and the more she thought about it, the more she realized that she was at a crossroads. She had to decide. Could she really let go of her old life and trust that Alexander had her best interests at heart? Or was this all a mistake, a temporary escape from the reality she had known for so long? Emily didn't have the answers, but she knew she had to make a choice soon. After a long pause, she stood up from the bed and made her way to the window. The view outside was breathtaking, vast gardens, towering trees, and the distant city skyline. It was all so far removed from her life in the city, yet something in the beauty of the scene made her feel as though she could be a part of it. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. She turned to find one of the staff standing there, a young woman with a polite smile. "Mr. Romano has requested your presence," she said, her voice soft and respectful. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected him to seek her out so soon, but there was no avoiding it now. She had no choice but to face him. "I'll be right there," Emily replied, her voice steady, though her nerves were anything but calm. She quickly dressed in a simple, yet elegant outfit, feeling the weight of the situation bearing down on her. She wasn't just meeting with him again. She was making a decision that would change everything. When she arrived downstairs, she found Alexander waiting in the study, sitting behind a large mahogany desk, papers spread out in front of him. His usual commanding presence was softened today, his posture relaxed, but his eyes, those dark, intense eyes, were as sharp as ever. "Come in, Emily," he said, his voice calm but insistent. "We need to talk." She hesitated before stepping into the room, her gaze locking with his as she crossed the threshold. Alexander motioned for her to sit, and she did so, her hands resting nervously on her lap. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was thick with unspoken words, heavy with anticipation. Finally, Alexander broke the stillness. "I know this is a lot to take in," he said, his voice low, almost gentle. "But I need you to understand something. I'm offering you more than just a place to stay or a chance to escape. I'm offering you a future that you deserve." Emily's heart raced. She had heard these words before, but they didn't feel the same this time. There was something in the way he spoke, something that made her believe he meant them. "A future," she echoed quietly, unsure of what else to say. Alexander leaned forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "Yes," he said, "a future where you can have everything you've ever wanted. A life free from worry, free from the struggle." Emily swallowed hard, her thoughts swirling. She didn't know if she could accept his offer. She didn't know if she could trust him, or if she even wanted to. But as she sat there, looking into his eyes, she realized something. This wasn't just about her. It wasn't just about the life she had left behind. It was about the possibility of something better, a future she never thought she could have. Alexander's voice brought her back to the present. "Take your time," he said. "You don't have to decide now, but understand that this is your chance. Don't let it slip away." Emily nodded slowly, her mind racing. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she had a choice. And that choice could change everything. Emily stood by the window, staring out at the sprawling estate as the soft glow of the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the lawn. Her mind felt like a whirlwind, thoughts racing in every direction. She had spent the last few days in this strange, luxurious mansion, caught between a life she once knew and the uncertain future that Alexander had offered her. She wasn't sure what to do. He had given her a choice, but the weight of that choice felt too heavy to bear. She couldn't deny that Alexander's world was tempting. He spoke with such conviction, such confidence, that part of her wanted to believe in the future he promised. A future free from the constant struggle, from the stress of living paycheck to paycheck, from the worry that seemed to follow her everywhere. But there was a part of her that still clung to her old life. Her daughter, her responsibilities. She had never imagined a life like this, a life of power, wealth, and influence. But as she stood there, looking out at the beauty of the mansion, she realized something. She wasn't just afraid of the change. She was afraid of what she might become if she let herself be swept into this world. The woman she had always been, the one who fought for her daughter, the one who worked hard to make ends meet, seemed so far away now. Alexander had made her question everything. She thought she knew who she was, but now she wasn't so sure. "You've been quiet," a voice said behind her, pulling her from her thoughts. Emily turned to find Alexander standing in the doorway, his gaze steady and unyielding. He had a way of looking at her that made her feel like he was always watching, always evaluating. "I've been thinking," she replied, her voice steady despite the uncertainty that gripped her. "About what you said." He nodded, stepping further into the room, his presence filling the space. "I understand it's a lot to take in," he said, his tone softer now, though still laced with the same intensity that made her heart race. "But I want you to understand this. You have the power to shape your future. No one can do that for you." Emily's chest tightened at his words. She wasn't used to hearing this kind of encouragement, especially not from someone like him. The thought of having control over her life, of choosing a path that was entirely hers, was both exhilarating and terrifying. "I don't know if I can trust you," she said quietly, her gaze not quite meeting his. "I don't know if I can trust myself." Alexander's expression softened just a fraction, though the steely edge never left his eyes. "Trust doesn't come easy. But I'm not asking for blind trust, Emily. I'm asking for a chance." The room seemed to shrink as the weight of his words settled over her. Emily had always believed in doing things on her own, in carving out her own path. But this was different. Alexander wasn't offering her a handout. He was offering her a partnership, a chance to build something together. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," she whispered, almost to herself. "I don't know if I can be the person you want me to be." Alexander took a step closer, his voice firm but gentle. "I don't need you to be anyone else, Emily. I need you to be you. The strong, capable woman you are." She looked up at him then, his gaze unwavering, and for the first time, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe he was right. Maybe she wasn't as lost as she thought. Maybe this was the chance she had been waiting for. "I'm not asking for anything from you except your belief in yourself," he continued. "The rest, we'll figure out together." Emily exhaled slowly, feeling the tension in her body begin to ease. The choice was hers, and it was time to stop running from it. She could stay here, take the chance, and see where it led. Or she could walk away, go back to the life she knew, and keep fighting the same battles. But something inside her stirred, a quiet voice telling her that maybe, just maybe, this was the moment she had been waiting for. "I'll think about it," she said finally, her voice steady. "But I can't promise anything." Alexander's lips curved into a small smile, the first sign of warmth she had seen from him in days. "That's all I ask." As he turned to leave, Emily stood there for a moment longer, her gaze once again drawn to the vast landscape outside the window. The world seemed so big, so full of possibilities. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she felt like she had the power to choose. And that was a start she hadn't known she needed, but now, she couldn't imagine going back without it. The days that followed were filled with a quiet tension. Emily spent her time pacing through the mansion, trying to sort out her thoughts, but nothing seemed to make sense. She had given Alexander her word that she would consider his offer, but now that the weight of the decision had settled in, she couldn't find a way to make the pieces fit. The idea of leaving her old life behind, of embracing this new world Alexander was offering, seemed like a dream, one that was too big, too far away. But she knew that staying in her old life would only keep her stuck. She had seen the struggle, the exhaustion in her own eyes every day, and the thought of her daughter facing that same future was something she couldn't bear. Still, every time she tried to picture herself in this new world, the image felt foreign. She wasn't like the people who surrounded Alexander. She wasn't like him. The sound of footsteps broke her reverie, and she turned to find Alexander standing at the doorway. His expression was unreadable, his eyes searching her face as if trying to decode the thoughts that were written there. "Are you ready to make a decision?" he asked, his voice calm. But there was an unmistakable edge to it. Emily met his gaze, feeling the pressure of the moment pressing against her chest. She had known this moment was coming. She had known it would be soon, but she hadn't expected it to be so hard. "I don't know," she said quietly, the words heavy with uncertainty. Alexander didn't move, didn't say anything for a moment. He simply stood there, watching her, as if waiting for something. "You don't have to decide now," he finally said. "But you can't keep running away from it." His words stung, but there was truth in them. She had been running, hadn't she? Running from the choice she had to make, running from the fear of what it might mean. "I'm not asking you to change who you are," he continued, his voice softening just a bit. "I'm asking you to see the possibilities that are within your reach, to take a chance on something more, on something better." Emily shook her head slightly, unsure of what to say. She wanted to trust him, to believe that he had her best interests at heart. But could she? Could she really put her future in the hands of a man she barely knew? Could she trust him with her daughter's future? She looked down at her hands, feeling the weight of the decision pressing on her. The silence between them stretched on, and for a moment, she almost wished he would say something more, something that would make the choice easier. But he remained silent, waiting. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling with the weight of her words. "What if I don't want this? What if I want to go back to my old life?" The question hung in the air, a raw, honest admission of her fear. Alexander's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. "Understanding, maybe. Then you go," he said simply. "But I'm offering you something more. Something you may never get again. The choice is yours." The finality of his words hit her harder than she expected. He wasn't forcing her, wasn't trying to manipulate her. He was giving her the space to choose, but the weight of the offer was still there. Emily knew that whatever decision she made would shape her future in ways she couldn't yet understand. She didn't know if she was ready for it, but she couldn't keep running from it either. "I'll think about it," she said, her voice steady now, but her heart still heavy with uncertainty. Alexander nodded, his eyes lingering on her for a moment longer before he turned and walked away, leaving her alone with her thoughts. She stood there for a long time, the silence in the mansion almost suffocating. Her mind kept going back to her daughter, to the life she had promised to give her. But could she give her that life by staying where she was? Could she build a future by staying in the past? The question lingered in the air, unanswered. All she could do was wait for the decision to come. And when it did, she knew it would change everything. Emily spent the entire night awake, her mind running in circles, replaying every conversation, every moment she had spent in Alexander's mansion. She had heard his words over and over. Each time, they sounded different, more pressing, more real. She couldn't escape the decision that hung over her. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about her daughter, her future, and the life she wanted to build. But was it worth leaving everything behind for a chance at something unknown? The hours dragged by slowly, and as morning light began to spill into the room, Emily made up her mind. She stood up, her body stiff from lying in bed for so long. She needed to talk to Alexander. She needed answers. She dressed quickly, her movements automatic as she prepared herself for whatever came next. When she reached the study, the door was open, and there he was, Alexander, sitting at his desk, his back to her. He didn't seem surprised when she walked in. "You've made your decision," he said, his voice calm, almost expectant. Emily hesitated for a moment, the weight of her choice still pressing down on her. But then she took a deep breath. "I have," she said, her voice steady but with an underlying uncertainty. Alexander didn't turn around. "And?" he asked, his tone still even. Emily walked into the room and stood in front of his desk, looking at him. "I want to take the chance," she said, each word coming out slower than she intended. "I don't know if I'm ready, but I'm willing to try. I'm willing to see where this leads." The silence between them stretched for a moment, and she couldn't read the expression on his face. It was like he was waiting for something more. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice soft but carrying an unmistakable intensity. Emily nodded, more to herself than to him. "I have to be. I can't keep running. Not anymore. I need to take control of my future. I need to believe in the possibility of something better for me, for my daughter." Alexander finally turned in his chair to face her. The look in his eyes was different now, more understanding, but still intense. "You're making the right choice," he said, standing up and walking toward her. "This is just the beginning. There's a lot to build, a lot to fight for, but you're not alone in this." Emily swallowed, the reality of the situation hitting her hard. She had crossed a line now. There was no turning back. Whatever came next, she was choosing it. She was choosing to step into a world that was as foreign as it was alluring. She had always been independent, but now, she was depending on someone else. She was depending on Alexander. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice quieter now, the uncertainty creeping back. Alexander's eyes softened, and he stepped closer to her, his presence commanding yet reassuring. "Now we begin. We take each step as it comes. Together." Emily nodded again, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was moving toward something. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't going to be simple. But it was a choice, and that was more than she had ever had. She had chosen a future. She had chosen to trust. And with that, she knew everything had changed. Alexander took a step back, and there was a hint of a smile on his lips, though it was brief. "I'll have the details ready for you soon," he said. "You'll be involved in everything. This is your future now, too." The words lingered in the air as Emily took them in. The mansion, the life, and Alexander's world. All of it now felt a little less foreign. She wasn't sure what it meant yet, but she was ready to find out. Whatever it was, she was prepared to face it. She had made her decision. And now, she was ready to begin.